My parents told me to prove my love by giving my $437,000 house to my sister. I refused, so my father smashed a metal cake stand into my head at the wedding. Then her fiancé exposed a secret that destroyed them a 40:34. My name is Lily. I'm 31 years old, and from a very young age, I understood one thing. In my family, love always came with conditions, and I never met them. When my younger sister, Madison, was born, I was 5. The entire household instantly revolved around that tiny red-faced baby. My mother, Carol, became a completely different person. She embroidered Madison's name on pillows, ordered matching outfits from Etsy, and made me the model big sister. My father, Harold, who used to take me to the park every weekend, was now always busy recording Madison's every yawn, every wobbly step, like she was the center of the universe. By the time I was 6, I knew staying silent was the easiest way not to bother my parents. I remember drawing a picture of a blue horse flying in the sky. I was so proud and brought it to my mom while she was feeding Madison. She glanced at it, pursed her lips, and said, "A blue horse? Why not draw something that makes sense? Like Madison, she draws sunflowers beautifully." I said nothing, folded the drawing, and shoved it under my bed, and it was never put on the wall, unlike Madison's scribbles, which covered the fridge. Madison had a bright tinkling laugh and dimples. Every time she laughed, the whole house lit up. I was nearsighted by 2nd grade with slightly hunched shoulders from always reading. My mom joked with friends, "Lily's smart, sure, but she's a bit rigid, not as adorable as Madison." They laughed. I laughed too, but inside, it wasn't funny at all. When I was 10, I won first prize in a statewide short story contest. I only wished my parents were in the auditorium. They didn't come. They were busy taking Madison to her first ballet class. When I brought the certificate home, my mom said, "Good. But don't let studying make you more uptight." "My dad?" he asked. "Was there a cash prize?" By contrast, when Madison was cast as the snow angel in the school Christmas play, my mom had a white dress custom made from France and even hired a photographer. I stood backstage helping Madison button up, fixing every clasp while they took hundreds of pictures. I wasn't in a single one. I used to think that if I studied harder, tried harder, maybe my parents would finally look at me with pride. So I threw myself into school. Every time I aced a test, I secretly taped the report card behind my bedroom door. No one asked. No one cared. But when Madison got a B+ in English, there was cake at dinner. I chewed on leftover rice while they played music and raved about Madison's brilliant future, the kind of excitement I never inspired. I wasn't jealous. I was hurt. There were nights I lay in the dark hugging my old teddy bear wondering, if I disappeared, would they even notice? By my teen years, I was basically an unpaid housekeeper. After homework, I did the dishes, hung laundry, cleaned the living room, while Madison was excused from everything to focus on her singing exam. Anytime I complained, my mom was ready with, "You're the older sister. You should sacrifice." But how much sacrifice is enough? I can't remember the last time my parents hugged me, but I clearly remember one night falling asleep at my desk from hunger. The next morning, my mom shook me awake and said, dryly, "Stop being dramatic. There's still a ton of chores left." After that, I stopped expecting anything. No praise. No attention. I wanted one thing only, to leave this place as soon as I could. I left on my 18th birthday carrying an old suitcase, a full scholarship from the University of Michigan, and a heart that no longer hoped for hugs. No farewell party, no good luck wishes. Madison was live streaming her newly decorated bedroom. My mom texted one line, "Good riddance. Don't bring shame to the family." Didn't look back. In Ann Arbor, I saw snow covering the porch roof for the first time and felt warmth not from the family kitchen, but from the dorm heater. I chose biochemistry, a subject my mom once said was for friendless nerds, but I loved it. I loved how tiny reactions could create life, how every molecule's motion made something miraculous. And for the first time in my life, someone called me a genius, not as a joke, but with real admiration. I studied nonstop, worked at the library at night, and cleaned labs on weekends. My college friends joked I couldn't survive without working. But for me, it was survival and the path to success. In senior year, I landed an internship at a renowned pharmaceutical company in Chicago, Everbright Biotech. After 3 months, they offered me a full-time role, something rarely given to fresh graduates, but I had earned it. The starting salary wasn't a dream figure, about $72,000 a year, but I knew what mattered more. I got to be myself. No longer Madison's sister or Carol's cold daughter, I was Lily Carter, molecular development associate, managing my own project budget. And most importantly, no one asked me to clean the living room after work. I lived frugally. No parties, no luxury shopping, no lavish vacations. I rented a small apartment, cooked at home, reused almost everything, and slashed every unnecessary expense. Every bonus and raise went straight to my savings account with one goal: to buy my first home before 30. And I did. Right after my 20th birthday, I signed the contract on a 3-bedroom house in Evanston just north of Chicago. The list price was $445,000. But after negotiation and a nearly 50% down payment from 8 years of savings, I bought it for $437,000. It wasn't a fancy mansion, but it had a backyard with a cherry tree that bloomed in spring, a small balcony where I could place a rocking chair and read in the evenings. The kitchen had pristine white tiles and the built-in oven I'd always dreamed of while using the rusty electric stove back in the dorms. I painted every wall by hand, installed every cabinet knob, chose every curtain. It wasn't just a house. It was proof of every sleepless night, every silent tear, every time I got back up when I wanted to fall. On move-in day, I mailed a card to my old family address. Not to show off, just common courtesy. I wrote one line: "I'm doing fine. No need to worry." I expected nothing back, and I was wrong to think that was the end of it. 3 months later, I got a message from my mom. "Lily, can you call me for a bit? It's something serious about Madison. It's important." I read the message over and over, feeling empty. Madison hadn't messaged me once since I left home. My mom even told people I was living somewhere near the Canadian border, as if I had vanished from their lives long ago. I didn't call back, but I knew when they started coming to me, the one they'd always treated like a burden, it couldn't be anything good, and I was right. The invitation to Madison's engagement party arrived just a week later along with a separate card from my mom. "We need to talk before the event. Don't be that, Lily. Be a good sister." I didn't yet know I was walking into the biggest storm of my life, but something deep down told me they'd never stop trying to use me. Only this time, they were about to play a dirty game I couldn't even imagine. Madison's engagement party took place at a rented mansion in Lake Forest staged to look elite. White silk-covered chairs, crystal glasses perfectly aligned, and cinnamon-scented candles filled the air. Guests looked like they were headed to a Manhattan gala. I walked in wearing a simple black dress, neat but modest, carrying a small gift, a silver photo frame engraved with "Wishing you happiness." Not expensive, but sincere. Madison stood at the center like a Disney princess, beaming, flashing a sparkling diamond ring. Next to her was Logan, her tall, composed fiancé, with the air of a decent man. As I placed the gift on the table, my mother, Carol, approached. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe. Then she tilted her chin toward a room at the end of the hall. "Your father is waiting in the side room. He needs to talk to you privately," she whispered, that fake smile still plastered on her face like she was saying something cheerful. I hesitated, then nodded. Deep down, the familiar dread of a family talk twisted my stomach. My father, Harold, was standing near the window. When I walked in, he didn't say anything at first, just crossed his arms and stared outside. The room was so quiet, I could hear the wind rustling through the trees. "You've settled down now, haven't you?" he asked without turning around. "I'm doing well," I replied evenly. He nodded slightly, then turned to face me, getting straight to the point. "Madison's getting married. She needs a solid start. And you? You live alone. You're not even using that house." I froze. My mind started racing to the worst possible conclusions. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "Your mother entered right on cue as if she had been waiting outside for the signal. We think, if you really love Madison, this is your chance to show it," she said, placing a hand on my father's shoulder like they were some unified front working for the good of the family. "You should transfer ownership of the house to Madison and Logan," my father said plainly. "Call it a wedding gift from her sister." I let out a dry laugh. "A gift worth nearly $500,000? It's your house," my mother said as if that made their request any more reasonable. "You don't have anyone. Madison's starting her life. She needs support. I don't have anyone, so I don't deserve to keep my own home," I repeated, my voice turning cold. "Lily," my mother began to raise her voice, "don't be selfish. Family means making sacrifices for each other." I looked her straight in the eye. "I sacrificed my whole childhood for Madison. Don't expect me to keep doing it in silence." The air grew thick with tension. "I'm not transferring anything," I said firmly, "and if anyone in this family ever cared about me, they'd understand why." My mother's face twitched. She stepped forward, about to say something more, but I had already turned and walked out of the room. Back in the reception hall, Madison was glowing, laughing with the guests. But the moment she saw me, her smile faltered just slightly. In her eyes, I saw something not quite surprised, more like irritation that I hadn't played along the way they expected. I didn't stay long. I didn't need dessert, nor did I want to hear another love song. As I walked out to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "Are you seriously going to ruin my special day? You should know better." I didn't respond, but I knew deep in my gut this wasn't over. The wedding was set 1 month after the engagement party. I had planned not to go, but in the end, I showed up partly out of politeness, partly because I didn't want to give them an excuse to call me the awful sister who skipped the wedding. The ceremony was held in a luxurious glass conservatory in the suburbs of Highland Park. Tall glass ceilings, string lights glowing like stars, cream velvet chairs, and hand-embroidered tablecloths. Everything was arranged to be flawless, except for one thing. My presence wasn't exactly welcome. I walked into a pointed cold shoulder from my mother. Madison didn't greet me. She was busy posing with Logan under the floral archway. I took a seat at the farthest guest table near the entrance, quietly observing like an outsider. After the vows, while guests sipped cocktails and sampled hors d'oeuvres, I had just picked up a glass of water when my mother approached. "Your father wants to speak with you." Again, in the corner of the hall, I wanted to refuse, but something in me still followed. The corner was curtained off with white fabric, far from the laughter and clinking glasses. When I stepped in, my father, Harold, was standing by the tall wedding cake. On the table beside it was a heavy metal base with the couple's names engraved. "Lily," he began, his voice softer than usual. "You still have a chance. Don't make today ugly." I stood straight. "If this is about the house, save your breath." "I've already said no. You're choosing this," my mother snapped from behind, voice sharp. "We asked for something simple, and you act like we're robbing you." Inhale deeply, trying to stay calm. "Something simple? That house is mine. I worked for 10 years to afford it. I never asked either of you for anything, not even a hug. Enough." My father growled. I turned to leave, but he suddenly grabbed my wrist. "You don't get to shame this family," he hissed. I yanked my arm back. "What family? The one that's treated me like a shadow my whole life?" And in that moment, something changed in his eyes. Before I could react, he grabbed the metal cake base, and in a flash, all I saw was a bright blur and the sound of something heavy striking. A searing pain tore through my head. I collapsed, blood dripping from my temple, running down my cheek onto the polished white floor. The room spun. The music still echoed somewhere in the distance, but all I heard were gasps. Someone yelling, "She's everything." After that felt like a blur. Some guests rushed over. Some filmed. Others screamed for help. Logan, the groom, ran across the hall, face stunned. A man in a gray suit, I remembered his name was Daniel, a former colleague of Logan, called 999 on the spot. My mother didn't help me. She stood by my father, eyes full of fury. "You're only hurting yourself, Lily. This could have been simple." "I just witnessed an assault," Daniel said loudly, still holding his phone. "A man hit a woman with a blunt object. She's bleeding from the head." I tried to stay conscious as chaos erupted around me. Logan's voice rang out furious. "What the hell did you just do?" My father took a step back as if only then realizing what he had done. The sound of sirens filled the air just minutes later. 2 officers entered, immediately locking eyes on my parents. "And, DeCarter," one officer said, "you're under arrest for suspected aggravated assault." My mother screamed, "She's lying. She made it up. She's trying to destroy her sister's life." The second officer didn't respond. He just looked at my mother and said, "Carol Carter, you need to remain silent. We'll take your statement later." They were both handcuffed on the spot in front of over 150 guests. People who had taken photos with them hours earlier now backed away in silence. No one spoke up to defend them. A nurse treated me at the scene before I was taken away in an ambulance. Logan rode with me, sitting at my side, his face still frozen in shock. "I can't believe this," he whispered. "I'm sorry, Lily. No one should ever go through something like this, especially not at their sister's wedding." I looked at him for a long moment. "Logan, you should really reconsider what you're marrying into. They're not just family." His eyes dropped. Neither of us said another word. As the ambulance pulled away from the glass venue, I looked back through the frosted window and saw the crowd starting to scatter. The wedding was over, shattered by a nightmare no one could have predicted. But what happened after would be the real blow to my family and to Madison. I was taken to the emergency room at North Shore Hospital. A nurse wrapped my head in white bandages, and the doctor confirmed a mild concussion with no life-threatening damage. While they stitched the cut on my temple, a police officer arrived to take my preliminary statement. I still remember him noting my name, the time of the attack, and listing the witnesses who were willing to come forward: Logan, Daniel, and at least 3 other guests. But while things were just settling down at the hospital, a full collapse was happening back at the venue. Margaret and Dean Whitmore, Logan's parents, had been present for the entire event. Normally reserved and courteous, they had smiled politely the whole time. But when the police cuffed Harold and Carol in front of everyone, that polite facade cracked instantly. "I can't believe this," Margaret said, pale, clutching her now warm wine glass. "That man, He actually used violence against his own daughter at her sister's wedding? Dean turned to Logan, his voice slow but razor sharp. Logan, are you sure this is the family you want to tie yourself to forever? Logan didn't answer right away. He just stood in the middle of the hall, expression sinking as Madison rushed over. Her dress still flawless, but her face ashen, like her mask had just been torn off. I had nothing to do with that, Madison nearly shouted, looking straight at her future in-laws. I didn't do anything to Lily. But you knew, Margaret replied coldly, and you let it happen. Madison stepped back. I just didn't want to ruin the big day. The big day where your sister ends up in the hospital and your parents are arrested? Dean cut in, barely hiding his outrage. If that's your idea of a wedding, then we can't be in-laws with a family like this. His words cut through the silent crowd like a blade. There were whispers, camera phones still recording. People began drifting away in small groups, avoiding Madison's eyes like she had committed an unforgivable sin. No. Please don't do this, Madison begged, tears spilling down her cheeks. I love Logan. Please don't call off the wedding. But Logan turned away. He walked straight to his parents and said in a low, firm voice, let's go. Madison was left standing there. No comfort, no defense. Even her best friend Becca quietly gathered her purse and slipped out without saying a word. The dazzling wedding gown that had made her stand out earlier now looked like a heavy curtain of shame. She collapsed onto a chair, eyes locked on the door that had just shut behind Logan. Around her, whispers stabbed through what was left of her pride. Her sister was bleeding on the floor. No one stopped it. What kind of family is that? And just like that, the wedding that had been planned for an entire year officially ended with a brief announcement from the event staff. Today's celebration will end early due to an emergency. No music, no dancing, no wedding cake, no bouquet toss. Only the echo of shock, uncomfortable stares, and a silence heavy with meaning. 3 days later, I was still on bed rest as prescribed by the doctor. Logan came to visit. In his hands was a bouquet of purple dahlias, my favorite flower. I'm sorry, Lily, he said, sitting beside my bed. What happened that day wasn't just a moment of losing control. It was the truth finally breaking through. I looked at him without speaking. The wound on my head still throbbed, but the real pain came from somewhere deeper. My parents have made it clear, he continued. The wedding is off, and I can't move forward with Madison. I can't bind myself to a family where cruelty is normal. I looked into Logan's eyes and saw sincerity, but I also knew one thing. Madison and my mother had never known how to give up. 3 days after the incident, I was discharged from the hospital. The CT scan showed a mild brain concussion and a scalp laceration requiring 8 stitches. The pain lingered each time the bandages were changed, but what hurt more was the truth. My parents felt no remorse. During the entire hospital stay, there was no message, no call, not even from Madison. Only Logan came every single day, bringing juice, soft meals, and gentle stories so I wouldn't feel alone. On the 4th morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the hospital curtains. Logan sat nearby holding a dark blue folder. When he saw me open my eyes, he immediately closed it and sat up straight. Lily, he said slowly, I reached out to a friend who's a lawyer. His name is Marcus Whitmore. He specializes in family lawsuits and has handled many similar cases. I stayed quiet. Logan didn't push. He gave me space. After a few seconds, I exhaled, eyes fixed on the ceiling. They're my parents, Welkin. I know. He hesitated. But they're also the ones who put you in the hospital, humiliated you in front of hundreds of people, and tried to steal the home you spent nearly 10 years working for. I turned to face him. If I sue them, there's no going back. Some roads aren't meant to be revisited, Lily. Logan held my hand, eyes steady. They're not family. They're the ones who caused you harm. Marcus met with me that same afternoon at the hospital. He was in his early 40s, sharp, concise, and straight to the point. After hearing the full story, he looked directly at me and said, we're filing with 3 main charges: aggravated assault, prolonged emotional abuse, and attempted unlawful coercion of property. With the current evidence, you have a very strong case. I nodded, though my heart pounded. I never thought I'd one day have to take my own parents to court, but then I remembered my father's wild eyes as he swung the cake stand at my head, my mother's knife-like voice, don't be selfish, and Madison's silence as I collapsed at her wedding. I signed the authorization form in silence. My hand trembled slightly, but the signature didn't waver. Marcus immediately started the necessary procedures, collecting witness statements, backing up all footage from the scene, obtaining medical records, and sending notification letters to the opposing side's legal representative, if they had one. Within 4 days, our case was fully prepared for submission to Lake County District Court. When I received confirmation of the preliminary hearing date, I sat in my kitchen holding the thick document but focusing on just one line. Ace. Lily Carter vs. Harold Carter and Carol Carter charges: assault, emotional abuse, attempted coercion of property. I folded the paper and set it down. Logan sat across from me, placing his hand gently on my back. "I'll be sitting in the front row for that hearing," he whispered. I said nothing. I didn't have to. My nod was the beginning of everything. Few days later, Marcus informed me that my parents had officially responded through their attorney. As expected, they denied everything. Their lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, citing lack of direct evidence and personal retaliation motives by the plaintiff. But Marcus just smiled. "Even better. Let me show them what direct really means." We had it all. Video from at least 6 different angles showing Harold hitting me with the metal cake stand, clear audio, clear blood, the horrified faces of guests, my mother's voice yelling, "Ungrateful." And most importantly, we had the truth. No one could deny 8 stitches across the forehead and 3 decades of emotional scars. I knew the trial wouldn't be easy. They'd twist the narrative, appeal to emotion, a daughter suing her own parents. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had the law, I had witnesses, and I had myself. Stronger, sharper, and no longer willing to endure in silence. On the day of the trial, I walked into the courtroom wearing a light gray suit, hair neatly pinned back, and the court summons in my hand. My heart thudded, not from fear, but because for the first time in my life, I was going to tell the full truth publicly, with the law listening, a jury watching, and society as witness. The room was packed. Local media were present, including familiar reporters from the wedding incident. Logan sat beside me, holding my hand like an unwavering anchor. Marcus, dressed in a crisp black suit, had a thick file in front of him. Right across the aisle, my parents, Harold, and Carol, sat stiffly, eyes sharp but betraying unease. They were no longer the ones who could control me with a look, a word, or a condescending tone. They were defendants, and now they had to face the consequences. The jury of 9, mostly middle-aged, showed no confusion as they watched the wedding videos. My father's hand gripping the metal stand, the sickening thud, my mother screaming. It was all there. Undeniable. Marcus took the floor, voice calm and razor-precise. "Your Honor, this was not a spontaneous act. It was the culmination of years of emotional abuse within a family structure where one child was treated as a tool, and silence was demanded as a virtue." He presented the evidence of hospital records showing 8 stitches and a concussion diagnosis. Video from 6 different angles recorded by guests. Testimonies from 7 witnesses, including Logan, Daniel, and an elderly couple who had known my family for years. When I took the stand, I took a deep breath and began. I spoke of a childhood filled with neglect, of silent late-night studying, of being scolded for not giving Madison the better share of dinner. And finally, of that moment at the wedding, the metal bass crashing into my head like the final chapter of 30 years of mistreatment. I didn't cry, not because I was stronger now, but because I had already run out of tears. Their lawyer tried to argue my father lost control due to emotion, but the footage didn't lie. His rage wasn't emotion, it was habit. Habit of dominance, of silencing resistance. After 3 days of proceedings, the jury was sent to deliberate. Less than 2 hours later, they returned. All stood, faces calm, eyes firm. The judge asked, "Have you reached a verdict?" A silver-made man stood as their foreperson. "We have, Your Honor. Regarding the defendants Harold Carter and Carol Carter, do you find them guilty of aggravated assault, prolonged emotional abuse, and attempted unlawful coercion of property? We find them guilty on all counts." The courtroom fell silent. My chest tightened, then slowly released. Logan squeezed my hand, his eyes wet, but smiling. Judge Judith Morrison, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a voice like a church bell, wasted no time. She declared, "Based on indisputable evidence and the severity of the actions, I sentence Harold Carter and Carol Carter to 8 years of incarceration in the state of Illinois with no eligibility for parole for the first 6 years." A murmur swept the courtroom, but she wasn't finished. Additionally, the defendants are ordered to cover all medical expenses, legal fees, and emotional damages totaling $320,000 to the plaintiff, Lily Carter. I sat there silently watching my parents get handcuffed and led out of the courtroom, faces expressionless. My mother turned back for a moment. Her gaze not of regret, but of unrelenting blame. I didn't return it. I had nothing left to prove. Outside, light rain was falling. Logan opened an umbrella covering us both. As the heavy courtroom door closed behind us, I felt like I had just shut an entire chapter of my life, one that I'd never forget, but no longer had to carry. I am no longer the forgotten child in the corner of the room. I am Lily Carter, the woman who stood up for herself and reclaimed justice through truth. And this is only the beginning. That afternoon, as I stepped out of the courthouse with a verdict in hand, the sky over Chicago seemed to glow. The morning rain had cleared, leaving soft rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds, shining onto the stone steps where I paused to exhale after days of tension. Logan stood quietly beside me, still holding my hand as he had throughout the trial. But this time, his eyes held something different. Not worry or anger, but steady, unwavering belief. "Lily," he said, his voice softer than ever, "I know this isn't a perfect moment, but life has never been perfect. Only our love is real." I turned to him, heart still pounding with the echo of victory. Then Logan pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. No fanfare, no crowd, no fireworks or applause. Just him, me, and the courthouse steps where I had finally reclaimed my voice. He knelt down. "Lily Carter," he said with a gentle smile, "will you spend the rest of your life with me? A life without pain, without pretending, just peace and real love." Tears fell before I could say anything. I nodded, crying and laughing all at once, my heart bursting open. "Yes," I whispered, "I will." The silver ring was simple, not blindingly sparkly like the ones Madison used to show off, but elegant and perfect. It fit not only my finger, but every hope I had ever carried. A love without spectacle, without strings, without conditions. We didn't throw a lavish wedding. No castles, no cliffside photo shoots, no noisy guest lists, just a small ceremony at the May in the backyard of the house I had bled to protect. White daisies bloomed along the stone path. White painted wooden chairs sat neatly under soft sunlight. Our officiant was Marcus, my devoted attorney who had become more than legal counsel, but a true friend through the hardest days. We invited about 30 people, only those who had truly shown up in my life. Daniel came with his wife, Logan brought his parents, and a few of my close colleagues from Everbright Biotech were there. Everyone fell silent as Logan and I read our vows. Words we wrote ourselves, not copied from any wedding script. "I won't promise to make you laugh every day," Logan said, his voice low and trembling, "but I promise you'll never cry alone." I couldn't respond in words, so I placed my hand over his heart and answered without a sound. But he understood. After the ceremony, we sat under string lights hung across the yard, ate homemade wedding cake, and listened to acoustic music from my old Bluetooth speaker. No one recorded it, no one live streamed, and no one cared about the label on my dress. They only cared that I was happy, truly happy. That night, Logan carried me across the threshold of our home. A small ritual, even as I laughed and told him my back didn't need lifting. But he did it anyway, and I let him, because I had never entered my own home feeling so warm inside. A few months later, we painted our bedroom a soft beige, planted lavender in the backyard, and built a large bookshelf against the living room wall, where I placed every book that had been with me since college. Logan called it the memory wall. I called it the evidence that someone survived being forgotten. Sometimes I still dream about the trial, still hear my mother screaming in my head, but each morning, I wake up next to Logan brewing coffee in my own kitchen. I remind myself, I no longer live in their shadow. I stepped out, reclaimed my name, and reclaimed the right to love and live on my own terms. And like Logan once said, we don't need a perfect life, just us is enough. One early fall afternoon, I sat in our little garden, the one Logan and I planted together. Every daisy, every lavender sprout. Sunlight filtered through golden maple leaves, soft like time whispering comfort. I opened an old leather notebook. On the first page, written when I was 16, were the words, "One day, I will get out of all this." Today, I don't have to dream it anymore because I did it. Then yes, I used to be the girl standing behind the living room door trying to hear my parents praise Madison while holding in a plus test no one looked at. I was the teenager who skipped meals so my sister could eat more, while my mother smiled and said, "You're the big sister. You should know how to sacrifice." I once believed love was something you earned through silence, obedience, and endurance, until I learned that endurance never buys real love. The lawsuit wasn't just a legal battle. It was a confrontation with the past. My way of saying, I'm no longer the silent daughter you dismissed. I stood up, not for revenge, but to end the cycle of control, suppression, and invisibility. I won't deny that deep down, I once craved their approval. But now, I don't need it. I have Logan, who loves me not for what I sacrifice, but for who I am. I have friends and colleagues who value me without needing to label me Madison's sister or Carol's daughter. And most importantly, I have myself. Whole, complete, no longer defined by anyone else. I've learned to forgive, but not to forget. Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for me. Because I deserve to be free. I no longer lock myself in memories that hurt. I choose to live fully. After the trial, I received countless letters from women who had lived through what I had. Some were forced into marriages for family gain. Some were labeled useless just for not fitting their parents' mold. They wrote to say my story, gave them the courage to say no for the first time in years. I read every letter, every message, and felt something lift in me. If my journey could spark courage in someone else, then every scar I carry has meaning. Later that year, Marcus, a group of community lawyers, and I co-founded a non-profit called Restore, a center providing legal and emotional support to those abused by their own families. Logan manages the finances, and I work directly with survivors. Every session, every grateful smile, every one thank you, I thought I was alone, reminds me that I'm living a life more meaningful than I ever imagined. One day, a woman in her 50s took my hand, tears streaming down her face. She said, "I've lived my whole life in fear, but your story gave me the strength to pack my bags and leave that house." I hugged her for a long time because I understood. I had been her, afraid, doubting myself, thinking silence was the only way to survive. But I chose to speak, and the most miraculous thing happened. I didn't just survive the darkness, I lit my own way out. Lily Carter used to be a name spoken with pity or mockery, but now it stands for a story of resistance, of refusing to bow down. It took me 30 years to become myself, but the rest of my life, I'll live with all the love, freedom, and pride I fought so hard to reclaim. And if you, the one reading this, are in a similar darkness, please remember, you don't need permission to protect yourself. You're not selfish for choosing peace over pain, and you, like me, deserve a new beginning. My story isn't just a journey through pain. It's proof of the power of courage and belief in oneself. From a child cast aside by her own family, I stood up, claimed justice, and built a life filled with love, independence, and freedom. I learned this. Our past doesn't define us. Our present choices do. Now, I live not to please anyone else, but to honor myself every single day. What do you think of Lily's journey? Have you experienced something similar? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow this channel for more powerful, heartfelt stories about family and life.